Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of May 3rd, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, part 2 of my conversation with serial innovator Peter Van Stolk, CEO of SPUD. We hone in on global online grocery trends, talk about his innovative FoodX platform and how it serves local consumers and small retailers alike, talk about the price of avocados, and even make a few predictions around the future of online grocery sales in Canada. Next up, a feature interview with Michele Sexsmith, Senior Vice President and Practice Leader, Retail, Real Estate, and Entertainment sectors from Environics Analytics, talking about their work helping retailers understand Canadian consumer online shopping behaviours and how their ClickSpend product, produced in partnership with JC Williams, can help retailers understand buying patterns right down to the local trading area. Plus, we also take a look for some surprises in the data. Last but not least, I'll cover off the top retail news of the week, including the New York Times celebrating Canadian retailer Indigo on their reinvention of bookselling, tap into some data about beer sales and retail creating jobs in Ontario, Nova Cannabis opens in Toronto, and Triple J Canna Space is Yukon's first cannabis store, but entrepreneurs in Calgary still struggling with a lease but no license. Walmart opens an AI store, and we'll talk about Amazon's Trojan horse strategy. But first, let's listen to the second part of my interview with Peter. We pick up the conversation talking about his FoodX platform. I ask him, beyond the likes of Walmart using his platform, is it the case that local food retailers can also use the platform to address the concerns of his customers who like to shop from their local grocers as well as SPUD, but can feel a bit guilty for not sharing their business with them, as smaller grocery players can't afford or have struggled to afford e-commerce as part of their business model until now?
That's very fair. Michael, you brought up a really good point, because when we do a lot of research, we look at different markets and we look at Korea, China, we look at Europe, we do a lot, that's one of the things that when you talk about innovation is making sure that you're looking at all four corners of this globe and finding things that are working and also finding things that aren't working. And one of the interesting things that if you look at the UK, and you know that the UK has the highest sort of e-commerce grocery, sort of online grocery penetration in sort of what we call the sort of the sort of established ground rules.
So what? When I think of the UK, I think 7, 8, 9% of grocery sales are online?
Yeah, it's a little higher than that. I've seen this year that by the end of 2020, it will be 20%. That's what Marks and Spencer stated in their press release when they bought the avocado brand, that they're stating that e-commerce will achieve 20% by the end of 2020 in their press release. So that's what they justified spending so much money on.
Wow, so interesting. 20%, that's a big leap, eh?
I know, it's pretty crazy. The numbers are pretty high right now, and they're moving fast because they're moving forward at such a rate. But since avocado and sort of e-commerce started, it's important to note, and this is a really important thing for retailers, that back when it really started, 33% of all groceries were sold by independents in the UK. Today, it's 8%.
Huh, interesting. All right, take us through FoodX. What's the value proposition? What have you built there?
Yeah, so what's really sort of exciting from our side is here we are, a small company based in Vancouver. We have operations in Edmonton, Calgary, and Victoria, and Vancouver. But we have a FoodX in Vancouver, and it's sort of the largest e-commerce fulfillment center, and it's completely automated. It's super cool. If you walk through there, you see it looks like a bit of Star Trek going on. People with scanners and headsets and conveyance going zipping around, and everything's moving pretty quickly. And it's got a lot of really interesting things and technology around it. But the interesting thing that we were able to do, and I think that's kind of cool, is that we've been able to create some AI around the process of building a shopping cart that reduces the what we call the cube. So when you think of a truck has to be cubed out, and our AI reduces these. It takes the information, it determines the size of the bin those products will fit in, it presets it, and then it takes this this journey on this bin and actually gets the license, so that the lasers send the bin to the appropriate locations of your products. And we're a fresh facility, meaning that we service produce, fresh meats, seafoods, obviously dairy and everything that you'd want. And it takes this, and it's the computer that's running the bin through this maze of conveyance, or conveyance systems, that takes it on this journey, and then we're able to service that in a very unique way. And it's kind of really cool, because what that does is it reduces the amount of, it provides better utilization on the trucks, meaning so you're reducing the greenhouse gases there. But the other thing that it does is, because it's a tote with a license plate, it allows us reverse logistics. So if you're a customer of ours, our drivers have scanners, and when they pick up your bin after dropping off your new bin, unique things in our bins, and we take it back. So think about, if you do buy Coca-Cola and it's a deposit, we scan it at your door, and you're credited on your account at that time. We take deposits back. And now what we've done, which is really cool, we've started to identify products like flex packaging. And Michael, in the grocery store, you would walk through a grocery store and you would see enormous amounts of products in these sort of bags that are Ziploc plastic bags, and an easy way to say it. And you can see that from the more environmental products to even now dairy cookies are in these, because that flex packaging is cheaper, and a lot of manufacturers are going to it. The challenge with the flex packaging is it's not recyclable in current municipalities' recycling systems. So we are actually taking back our own bags. Anything that we put into the system, we've figured out that we want to have a full cycle or full loop on our system. And we think that's a full cycle is the future of retail. We think that retailers who can say, I'm going to sell you this product, and I am going to be accountable for the packaging in it. If it's not blue bin recyclable or curbside, we will be accountable. That's what we are doing, and that's what we're starting today. And that's unique. Besides the fact that we're a plastic-free bag and we're reducing all these other things, but where we're taking, and it's that, think about it, it's a full circle. It's a circle economy. Versus a one-way economy. And that's what I think is super cool.
So basically what you've built is a fully integrated reverse logistics supply chain nested within the value chain. Really, really interesting. Speaking of interesting, let's move now to prognostications. Let's talk about your forecasts. Let's talk about what we think, together you and I, mostly you, think about what online sales is going to look like in the grocery category. So, if we could pick a number today, it probably is somewhere around less than 1, +1, 2%, depends on how you factor it and what you look at it. As meal kits involved in that, it probably takes it up to a couple of percent. But where do you think it's going to go? Where do you think online sales are going to go as a share of grocery, and how do you think they're going to get there? And when do you think you'll see the kind of numbers you see in the UK here in Canada?
Well, I would say by 2025, and that's the reason why that's going to happen is there's a couple things. So in the urban centers and in the suburban centers. So what you're seeing in the urban centers, you're going to have a much higher number than the suburban. And that's just due to where you're seeing the whole shopping, sort of how that's working. It has to do a lot with three factors. One is real estate's really expensive. So you have to now think about the cost of building a grocery store in downtown Vancouver is exorbitant, right? It's prohibitive just based on real estate. And then think about this from a grocery store's perspective. Can you afford an aisle of Cheerios when the cost of the real estate that Cheerios is sitting on is so expensive? So that's one factor that we don't talk about, but it's really important to understand. Two, the factor is that consumers are now, you have a millennial consumer and you're going to have a Gen Z consumer. These consumers are different consumers than the Gen X consumer. And these consumers were brought up with an iPhone. It's important to note that the iPhone only launched in 2007. It's it's just 12 years old, and we're thinking about this and think about when you're talking to retailers about the mobile impact or how mobile has impacted retail, and you're only talking about something that's been around 12 years. In fact, it was June 9th, 2007 when the phone launched. So that is only going to get bigger, and we are only attached to our phones. They're just, so that's just happening. And we haven't really taken that on in our conversations. So when you start saying, okay, it's 2019, percentage of online grocery in Canada is about 3 to 4%, whatever it is. If you include meal kits, it may go higher. If you include DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that other stuff, which is still changing the way we're looking at our shopping experience, because what's happening is that is now going into the grocery sort of sector. And we used to have these very defined sectors of grocery and restaurant, and that's all getting mucky, right?
Right. So that's what we call that grocerant trend, right?
Yeah. So when you take all those factors in, I foresee it to be about 20% by 2025. And I'm saying that for two reasons. If you look at 2007 as sort of a very important year in the history of e-commerce, that was a year that Amazon bought its first apparel company. And apparel was said that at that time, people said nobody's going to buy clothes online because they can't try them on, right? That was boom. Well, that's gone now. It's moving up to about 30% of is now online. If you just read Lululemon's most recent 3 pillars, e-commerce was number one of the 3 pillars, right? So you're going to see that push to e-commerce for growth for apparel is going to continue. And so there's a lot of reasons why e-commerce is going to drive, because a lot of the retailers who have an easier way about it, meaning apparel, books, and all these things that are easy, are driving the customer and training the customer that e-commerce works for them. So when I say that e-commerce is going to be 25% of the grocery industry, when you really look at the micro trends that are happening right now, and you look at the macro trends that have occurred in other categories, I would bet dollars to donuts that I may be light on that number. That point is that when you're looking at both China and Korea, you have economies that have been really very steadfast in the technology space with respect to their phones. And people don't realize that obviously Korea is the Samsung and the LG markets, right? Those are where and China has its own phone. So when I was in China, I didn't realize that Chinese consumers change their phone every 9 months. So the Chinese consumers now do their taxes on their phone. Right? So it's really important to understand that it's not just about e-commerce. It's about how we are living our lives in the future. And I don't necessarily agree with the fact that how much time the average Gen X or millennial spends 3 hours a day on their phone. That's the truth. So just think this through. So if you take that function of how much time are the consumers spending on the phone, why wouldn't they use that time to buy the stuff they want to buy? And if you look at the graph of how much time they're spending on their phone, that graph isn't going down. And I believe that the retailers, and especially grocery retailers, have been sort of avoiding this for a long time, because the model that a grocery retailer has is that their model is that customers drive to their stores. So they use their energy, their gas. They spend their time walking through their stores. They spend their time picking the products up, putting it through. And that was decided upon because that's how we used to shop before. Now you're never going to get away from a store. And obviously 20% is a small number when you consider the size of the category in Canada, which is 120 billion in grocery. So it is still a small number percentage wise, but it's to sit here and say that we're going to be 7, 8, 10% when you're seeing apparel, and if you did and talk to your apparel retailers, what they're saying is it currently in the States? What is that seeing? And you see the investment spending by the brands and by the retailers to push customers to online. That is only filling the boat for other categories.
So, Peter, over and above all this, you're a retailer, you're a grocery retailer. So I really wanted to tap into some of your insights about modern food trends and what consumers are buying. I just wrote an article for Canadian Retailer magazine called The Chicken or the Egg of Canada's New Food Guide. And I was curious and just thinking about how, does the food guide reflect what consumers are buying today, or is it going to shape buying in the future? My short answer in the article is yes, basically. But you're at the front lines. You're at the front lines of a very innovative food retailer. You've got leading edge, if you can describe them that way, consumers. Tell me about how you see the implications of the food guide, and is that trend and the trends that they describe, are those the trends that you're seeing, and where do you think that's going?
It's a great question. I think, first of all, people are looking for food transparency. And I think the transparency is going to be very, very important. So not only, what is it? When was it made? You have these sort of codes on there, but actually what ingredients, which cow, was it Betty who gave the milk for money in it? That's really, the transparency is really, really important because consumers are concerned about food recalls. And the mass production of food has been done, a couple things. It's driven down some prices, but it's also created problems everywhere. So I think what you have sort of three really important trends. And I always look at Europe as sort of where we see trends. And I also look at Asia where we see trends. And then I look for fashion trends. I look at New York and Paris. And then I try and put all these trends together and say, okay, what is going to happen with the food? And so when I look at that, I see there's going to be a convergence on transparency and health. That's never going to go away. There's going to be a convergence on fresh produce because they know that produce is healthy and it's also something that they want to put in their diet. So they want convenient produce. So how do you find convenience? So is that value-added produce? There's going to be sort of, you see the adoption of meal kits are really, really exciting. So they want to cook food, but they want to make it convenient. And so when I see that, I say there's three real big things. There's going to be a convergence on health, convergence on convenience, and a convergence on value, all surrounded by food transparency and food security. So when you start thinking about the Canadian Food Guide, we know that we also have to take into consideration global warming and the prices of food that are going up. And, we sent out an email to our customers about avocados. And I don't know if you've watched the price of avocados recently. They've skyrocketed.
Yeah, what, like up 14% or something like that, right?
Oh, no. They're going up. They're crazy pricing. So... And do you know why?
No, I don't. What's driving up the price of my avocado toast?
The border crisis recently, when the president of the United States said he was going to close down the Mexican border. So it used to take 1 day for a trailer load of avocados to clear the U.S. border. Now, let's be honest, avocados only can come from certain places in the world. In Canada, we do not grow avocados, right? So avocado toast is not coming.
Right. So there'll be no growing of avocados in Winnipeg this year.
So now the average length of time for a truck to clear since that call is 4 days. So the length of time for it, so you have all these trucks backing up, and you have this issue is you have a fresh produce item. So you have this mass change in the cost of goods based on one person making one tweet and changing the whole value cycle of food. It's amazing. It's very interesting. I can send you this article from the New York Times that they said it's just unbelievable. It's just crazy. So that's the thing that you're going to see. So we're seeing people go away from avocado toast at our stores to more of, it's more of a peanut butter and toast kind of thing, or what their organic almond butters are coming back really solid. We're seeing different purees coming in, and we're seeing people starting to realize that that's it. So when you asked me about what do I see about food and the Canadian Food Guide, I think the Canadian Food Guide is getting it right. I think there's going to be a huge trend to plant-based proteins for many reasons, because the guys are getting smart to make the Beyond Meat burger taste like meat versus trying to taste like mushrooms, and I think that's pretty cool.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining the Voice of Retail. You've been so generous with your time. It's been so fascinating, as always, chatting with you about strategy, innovation, grocery trends, food trends. I think we covered a great wide variety of top issues. So really, once again, thanks so much for joining me. And let's hope for a lower price of avocados in our near future.
Thank you for making this, and thank you for being patient with my technology. And here I run a company, and I can't even get on. That's so crazy. What an idiot. Where are my people?
Well, thank you so much. Actually, you're only the second person, but the good news is the first person was our good friend Dave from Microsoft. So you're in good company.
There you go. That's awesome. I feel good now. Thank you. I have a smile on my face, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and have a great night.
You too. Bye.
We'll be right back.
This is Steve Dennis. After more than a 20-year career as a senior executive at brands like Neiman Marcus, I'm now a consultant, speaker, and Forbes contributing writer on what it takes to reinvent retail in the age of digital disruption. And the good news is that physical retail isn't dead. The bad news is that boring retail most certainly is. So I hope you'll join me at Store 2019 to hear my unique take on the state of modern retail. As the lines between digital and physical blur, and as consumer preferences evolve, retailers need to reimagine their customer experience, often radically. In my keynote, you'll discover what brands around the world are doing to transform their business to be more remarkable, and you'll learn 8 killer strategies so you don't wind up stuck in the boring middle. That's Store 2019, May 28th and 29th in Toronto. Learn more and get your tickets now at storeconference.ca.
Michele, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. You and I have known each other for a long time, and now we find ourselves here today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Environics Analytics, and what your role is here.
Well, I've always been very interested in research and understanding why people do the things they do. It's a curiosity to me that's driven a lot of my work. I've been in this industry for a long time, working with retailers back for decades, really. Originally around site location types of decisions, but increasingly more around getting at the persona of that consumer and different consumer types in the market. So it's what really drives us in our business.
So tell me a little bit about that. Let's delve into what you do here. You cover a lot of different areas, but we're going to talk about retail today, obviously. And tell me a little bit about Environics Analytics. So where you fit in the market, and what do you spend most of your time on?
Okay, so our day-to-day work involves providing our clients with information to help with key insights for various parts of their business. So in retail, that's around who's my consumer, what's my most profitable customer. So a lot of demographic, lifestyle characteristics to help with that, as well as expenditures, understanding who's spending a lot in particular categories of goods. And all of that is very data-driven. So it's around neighborhood-level characteristics so that you can see regional variations, store-by-store variations, and increasingly understanding that e-commerce consumer in the marketplace and how that's disrupting the rest of the marketplace.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about e-commerce. I mean, one of the interesting things about that, it's such a big industry, or getting bigger. It's got such a great growth trajectory, double-digit growth versus single-digit growth and overall retail. So we know it's taking share, but there's a bit of a gap in terms of numbers and understanding. So let's talk about the work that you do to help retailers understand consumers and how they buy and how that can help them do what they do better. So you have a tool called ClickSpend. Is that really the key tool that you leverage for that?
Yeah, so that's one of our latest releases. It covers a lot of different categories of goods, so apparel, entertainment, food and grocery. So a lot of different categories to understand how is that consumer spending by neighborhood and what portion of their spend is spent online versus what is spent in the bricks and mortar arena.
Michele, tell me about the impetus to create ClickSpend and any partnerships that you got involved in to make that happen.
We work with retailers across the entire industry, and they needed to have better metrics to understand how big the e-commerce opportunity was in the Canadian marketplace. They needed to understand how it impacted their store network and planning for the future for their stores, as well as how much of their development costs should go into building out their full e-commerce platforms. We work with J.C. Williams Group, who had been working in e-commerce surveying for a while and had some history in this category, and specifically in retail. So we worked with them on 14 different categories of goods to understand the percentage of the consumer spend in those categories. And then we estimate all of that information to the local neighborhood across the entire country to take into account the regional differences.
So it's a great merger of so to speak, of retail brand strategy. J.C. Williams, top-tier organization, very well respected in retail for those of you listening who may not know. Certainly you guys would. So I see now how it came together. The best of both worlds, right? Deep analytics plus the strategy and the insights from J.C. Williams.
Yeah, and it's been a great partnership in order to be able to provide that perspective on all of those categories of goods, ranging from kitchen to footwear to sports and apparel.
When I think of online spending, I think of online as in everybody who's on the internet globally can shop online. And then I think, as a practitioner myself and as retailers would, I know the individual, but you've kind of built this triangulation that puts physical on top of buying behavior. So you've learned some interesting things about what Canadians buy in general. So let's talk about that. What I think you've put what was it, the average Canadian spends $2,400 online, something like that?
Yes, that's right.
So tell us a little bit more about that. It's not equal across all commodities, and interestingly, it's not equal in terms of geography too, right?
Absolutely. So, certainly some of the key categories are around food and grocery. It's a very big category to begin with. The percentage that's spent online is not very big right now, but it's growing. And so that's a category that we're watching to see how that takes off. Certainly there's a lot of interest. There's been a lot of disruption already in the restaurant category, take home from store, all of those types of elements.
It's transforming the way consumers think about, I think, home delivery, and it seems to have knock-on effects on all industries, really.
It's a huge change. We think about meal kits that are delivered, the actual, already prepared food that's just delivered to your door. It's that whole combination of things that makes up that category for online spend.
What I thought was interesting in some of the results, it was that, there's obviously, or not so obviously, but there's a break between rural and urban shopping behaviors in general. And in some ways that I thought was a bit counterintuitive, that the rural were shopping less. And it was interesting, I was reading some of the background data around the insights that you've done, is that it has more to do with, like, in one way you would think they would be the perfect people for online retail because there's less stores, it's a little less convenient to get to the stores or whatever, but yet they tend to shop online a bit less. So what observations did you have around that?
Well, one of the key elements is still the cost of shipping across Canada. It's extensive when you're dealing with more rural locations, and so very often that shipping is not free. So, there's a certain portion of the market that are stepping up to Amazon Prime so that they can get free shipping, but it hasn't taken off quite the same way yet in the rural markets. It's a generality. But having said that, even in different markets across the country, we can see some surprises with e-commerce spend. If you look at Halifax, for instance, there's an awful lot of online spend compared to a market like Edmonton or Winnipeg. So it's interesting to see that there's a lot of regional variation when we really delve deeper into say who's spending and in which categories they're spending.
It almost feels like a little bit of chicken and egg. In other words, for the retailers, it's expensive to get same day, next day, 2-day, or whatever into certain parts of the country. We have a fundamentally vast land, right? We're a very big place that's sparsely populated. It changes the dynamics for retailers because, unlike in the U.S., for example, or even when you go overseas, you look at countries like South Korea with double-digit online grocery spend. Well, there's a density there that makes it just such a viable commercial undertaking, not just for the people, but for the retailers. So let's talk about how retailers can use the data and the insights that you have on an ongoing basis. What would they use it for? So first of all, they're going to understand more in general about Canadians. So that's a great starting point. How big is the universe? 2,400 roughly per. But tell me some examples of retailers you're working with and how they're using the data and insights that you've got.
So in general, they're using the information to understand their market share. So they know internally what percentage of their customers are shopping within the stores. They know what their e-commerce looks like. And as long as they've seen double-digit increases, they think they're keeping up with the market. But in some cases, the category is growing exponentially compared to what they might see within their own data. So it really provides that perspective to say, all right, this category is growing a whole lot further than I thought it was, and we thought we had good coverage of the market, but we still need to push the envelope further and really create an omni-channel experience that's consistent within the online channel and the offline channel, and make sure that that consumer always comes back to us to make their purchases regardless of which way they want to purchase, whether in-store or online.
You bring up a good point. I've been thinking about omni-channel, online and offline, and more I think of it as a distinction without a difference. I mean, really, the consumer is seeing retail, online, offline as all one thing, and retailers are kind of turning their minds to that more and more. So I guess with using some of the data that helps them understand consumers that are local, again, back to what I was saying, is in some ways, I don't care where they are in Canada, but really retailers should and do, because that behavior where they're shopping online and shopping in their stores and everything in between. So I guess that's a way to leverage the data and your understandings, right?
Yeah, so if we look at a retailer that's got a store that's underperforming, they might want to get that perspective on how much of the people in that nearby trade area are already purchasing online. Is that the issue, or is it the competition down the street and they're still in that bricks and mortar type of framework with their purchasing? So being able to separate those elements and understand then how does that impact the way they do assortment and design, and who's that right consumer and who should they be trying to attract within that store, and make sure they get all of the elements from an operational standpoint to display in sync with that opportunity is really the key challenge.
It's interesting because it's not just merchandising strategies, but also it can also be whether they're using programmatic or however they're doing outbound advertising. They can start to tailor that message, right? So if there's probably some places in the country that have higher online apparel sales, right?
Absolutely.
Which, give me an example. Where would I find a very high spending online apparel?
Well, certainly within Vancouver and Toronto, you're going to see very high online spending in that category.
So and conversely, I noted in the data that Mississauga, where I'm from, is very high in electronics, but Brampton a little less so in terms of online spending. So I guess that allows the retailer to tailor their communications out to those markets accordingly. So not just to understand what percentage of people are buying, but what they're buying allows a bunch of different things, right?
There's a whole lot of implications here. So some of them could be, what's the media mix in order to reach that online consumer, to let them know what is available to begin with, even to take that bricks and mortar consumer and understand what are the differences between those two types, which channel is driving their behavior to begin with, and then what's the right media mix in order to reach that consumer. So if we talk about media mix, the understanding, should they be in social media? Is that what that particular consumer type is really going to in order to get their information, or are they going there to get information on reviews? Or is it purely a matter of convenience that particular day, and they'll choose one channel versus another in order to fulfill whatever it is they need to purchase that day?
A little harder to understand, but it kind of teases out the data, at least the potential, right? The potential in those, right down to the local trading area, pretty much.
Right down to the local trading area. And that's, and understanding those consumers that, prefer, say, the online channel versus the bricks and mortar channel can also help with understanding what sort of messaging is going to resonate with that consumer. So it helps the retailers to understand there's several different consumer types within their opportunity area, and they might need to focus that personalized messaging to each of those different segments within the medium that they pay attention. So, one segment might be more traditional type of advertising with print. Another
more
one
mass
is totally
media,
media play. display type of advertising with a very different type of message. And then the messaging can be anything around attitudinal elements. So do they want to hear about the brand message? Do they want to hear about the history of the brand? Is this a very price-sensitive consumer type? And so it really needs to be around, here's why you need to, take advantage of this discount that's available, for a limited time.
I love talking about this stuff. In my past lives and different careers, the only way sometimes we could understand what was going on in a neighborhood was the old leaf bag trick. We would give out free leaf bags with our logo on it and then drive around the neighborhood and see who had our leaf bag at the end of the street. So it's just so fun and so interesting talking about the sophistication that you bring to the marketplace. It's really interesting. Couple of last questions. So we've been collectively doing this. You've been doing this, looking at data for many years. Mm-hmm. Any surprises? Anything that you went, wow, I didn't really expect to see that? Anything catch you? Anything jump out at you?
Some of the categories, I guess, were quite different than what we expected. One of the lifestyle types we have is tools and trucks. So you think about blue-collar workers that are well-established. There's not the ones that are at risk at jobs, but ones that are in suburban locations, well-established families, etc. Yeah. And we found they have a huge amount of online spending and across every single category. And so that really took us back, and we said, well, that's really interesting. It's so it's a case of convenience, I think, in that case. Hardworking individuals, they can't, they can't just take off from the job site and go shopping for an hour or two. Or they might be shift workers, and so it's difficult to do so. So that could be driving part of the behavior. We were expecting things like urban digerati, like young condo dwellers were going to be spending a lot in the online category, but it's not consistent in their case. There's definitely some categories that they're spending a whole lot more, so electronics is one of those, but also toys, because they're starting to have young children in the household, time-stressed, and so it helps them to get all the things done that they need to get done in a day, and so it's interesting to see that variation. I think we also have to keep in mind there's still a good part of the total spend that's still in the bricks and mortar channel. Yeah, of course. There is no retail apocalypse, right? I mean, exactly. 80-90% of retail is still done in physical stores. Absolutely. And that does vary by category as well. So, I mean, we talked about food and grocery is still mostly in the bricks and mortar channel. Probably less than 1%, I'd say, if you had to put a number to it. But a couple percent, but it's still quite low compared to some other categories that might be 20% of the spend. So we see things like health and beauty products. I mean, that is in the 20% category. And so I think everyone had a sense that that category was building. But again, that's a surprise to see it quite hitting those levels and almost double what the average is across the country compared to other categories of goods. Well, listen, I'd love to have you back on because I think we could continue talking about different elements of the discovery and different elements. There's so much appetite for information amongst retailers, whether they're brick and mortar or online or both, more and more. For now, how can people get a hold of you? How, if they want to learn more about whether it's ClickSpend or the insights or how to work with Environics Analytics, how do they get a hold of you? You're certainly welcome to phone. My direct line's 416-969-2760. Or you can have a look at the website, www.environicsanalytics.com. Perfect. Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you. All right. Cheers. All right, well, thanks to Peter and Michele for joining me on the podcast today. Kind of two interesting, different but certainly complementary perspectives on online grocery retail. We touched on that in both of our interviews. So let's turn on now to Retail This Week, what's happening in retail. And many of these stories are taken from the companion piece to the Voice of Retail podcast, Retail This Week, which is an email sent out each and every week I put together for Retail Council of Canada, summarizes and curates top most interesting retail stories in Canada around the world. We kick it off with a great feature article in the New York Times about our friends at Indigo. So how a Canadian chain is reinventing book selling. It's a great article, and really, Heather's been spot on in so many things, and is really, with her recently opened store, I think in New Jersey, has really gotten the attention of how she's really created and recreated with this cultural department store idea, a whole new really genre, and has really breathed new life into bookstores. So great article there for the New York Times. Following that article here from Toronto Star, retailers say expanded beer sales
and wine sales in Ontario could create thousands of new jobs. That's some work that Retail Council of Canada is doing, looking at the expansion of beer and wine sales outside, certainly beer sales outside of brewers retail. And in Ontario, most but not all, certainly for the past, 18 months, there's been some points of presence in grocery stores, but really lots of calls to expand that to be more comparable to, even provinces like Quebec, Alberta, and many of the other provinces, to expand access to beer sales. Good article here, really, from Toronto Life. Talks about Inside Nova, which is Alcana's, I should say, retail cannabis stores. This one located on Queen Street. Visited that one myself this week. Did a site inspection. Nice store, very modern. There's some great pictures here from Toronto Life. They describe it as a bright, open concept feel of an Apple store. We hear that often, right? The Apple store of cannabis retail. So it's a nice store. The associates were great. Really took time and explained what they were doing and talked all about the product. They've got some great technology in there. They've got, each of the associates has a mobile order pad, mobile kind of iPad order pad. There's a self-serve kiosk, and then all these orders go through and then get dispensed, and your number, of course, not your name, is called on a board to pick up your product. So really interesting, and congratulations to Nova for opening their store just on Queen Street. If you're Queen Street West, if you're in Toronto, just west of Spadina. If you're in Vancouver, listening to the sound of my voice, be sure and go to Daryl Jones, President Save On Foods, great merchant, fantastic merchant. We'll be talking to members of vendors and suppliers, whether it's product vendors, so be sure and do that. That's on March 9th in Vancouver. IKEA, here's a good article from the Daily Hive, has actually officially phased out all single-use plastics. You're going to see a lot more of that to come for sure, but IKEA, as in many things, leading the way in terms of sustainability, and a big push there for sure. Article from the Globe and Mail from Marina Strauss, who I'm going to have on the show soon, which would really be great. I've known Marina for quite a while, so it'll be just great to talk about tradecraft of a real reporter, unlike myself, who is running a podcast. But Marina's been doing great reporting on the retail sector for probably at least 20 years. Anyway, Loblaws raises dividend while first quarter profit falls. So it's actually a good overview piece, not just on Loblaws, but on all the major grocers, what's going on between expansion or demand of the discount banners, in this case, no frills, but it also talks about Sobeys, Metro's growth, some inflation and food pricing. So kind of a good article, overview, good snapshot article of what's happening today. Our retail around the world, Walmart's AI-powered store of the future. There's actually a bunch of articles that came out, so you can find that number of places. I picked the one from Fast Company, and it's really interesting. When you look at it, it's just jammed with cameras. You can see the servers through glass, very visible to people, and it's not the kind of Amazon Go, shop it like you stole it type environment. That's not what they're trying to do here. They're using out of stocks and using AI to predict out of stocks and detect out of stocks and get that filled right away from associates. So it's interesting how they use the technology to make sure and have their customers have a great shopping experience. I put this article in 6 hours in the dark heart of retail. It's from the Robin Report. I met the folks in the Robin Report when I was at Shop Talk in Vegas, and it's a bit of it's cleverly written. It's a bit of tongue-in-cheek visit to the Hudson Yards. We've talked about the Hudson Yards a couple of times, and it really is worth a read because it made me laugh out loud a couple of times for some of the things they were saying, particularly when they start describing the Neiman Marcus sign that really only exists once you're on the inside in reverse. That made me laugh. It was pretty funny anyway. Good article from the Robin Report. Walmart Target shares tumble as Amazon announces one-day shipping. That Amazon Jedi trick of just putting out an announcement. But, this has been coming for a while. Amazon expanding their delivery service, going to try and keep one step ahead. And, of course, they're building their own fleet. Nothing new about building their own fleet. Most retailers have that. But, of course, in Amazon style, they kind of play that up. This is from CNBC, so check that out. Retail news for entrepreneurs. There's a story here from the Calgary Herald talking about two entrepreneurs, Wes and Wes Bruneau, Brio and Bill Evans, who've started a cannabis store, Strathmore Retail Cannabis, but they can't get any cannabis. Actually, I think Alberta just released 27 licenses. So these guys are paying like $3,000 a month rent, expecting that they were going to be able to get licensed and be able to retail cannabis. So that is the not so great side for sure of retail cannabis in the early days, where there's not enough supply, and the provinces, including Ontario, of course, but not just Ontario, is limiting the licenses to address that, or to respond to that, I guess you could say. And conversely, though, in Yukon, which opened up in October with only online sales, opened up their privately owned Yukon's first privately run cannabis store, Triple J's Cannabis Space, opened up at downtown Whitehorse. Congratulations to them. Nice picture, good looking store from what I can see from the pictures. So if you happen to be in Whitehorse, you now have a place to buy your recreational cannabis. Got some good comic book boom stories here from Giant Robot Comics Dartmouth. Interesting story talking about the effect of the Avengers and Endgame and how that changes the composition of the people going into comic book stores for good and sometimes for ill, I guess. And then great story on Jackie Cohen, who is celebrating Army and Navies in Vancouver. That's an institution in Vancouver, their 100th anniversary. So it's an interesting story because it's from Business of Vancouver, the comic book story from CBC. Anyway, the Jackie Cohen story is easy because, as a quote, "Who the hell would have thought that little Jackie Cohen, trust fund brat, jet setter," again, this is a quote from her, whatever, would still be standing, the Army and Navy would turn 100 years old. So it's an interesting backstory. So if you don't know it, be sure and read that from Business in Vancouver. Moving on, Amazon rolls, the Amazon story of the week, so to speak, a Trojan horse into rival retailer store. Really, this is, it's not new that Kohl's has been accepting Amazon returns, but they seem to be upping that game. So, big question, right? Does that make sense? You certainly get the foot traffic, but at what cost? Fast fashion for Forever 21 closes shop in China. So, notwithstanding many of the comments about forever not being forever, it seems like they've given up on China and haven't been able to make a go of it. Not the first one, and probably not the last one. Tough market for anyone to operate in. So, Forever 21 exiting that market as they reassess what they're doing. What else we got? There's a couple of interesting articles that are coming out, and you can see this one from CNBC. Sainsbury's in the UK is opening a first checkout free store. I think I saw another article that Wegmans is doing the same. So everyone is trying these different approaches to full serve, self serve. And in this case, looking Sainsbury here, it's not exactly Amazon Go by any sense. There's a QR code. It's more kind of like Hema in Beijing or in Shanghai. Free Shippo, I think it's called now. Actually, they changed the name. So it's not an Amazon, but it's moving down that spectrum more close towards it. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform. Please, if you like it, rank us, review us, and give us a high star ranking. It helps move us up in the rankings. You can also ask your favorite home devices, Amazon Echo, Google Home. Just say, "Hey, Google, play the Voice of Retail podcast." I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc & Company. And you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Join me again next week for my interview with Retail Council of Canada's Independent Retailer Ambassador of the Year for 2019, Poppy Barley's Kendall Barber, retail and loyalty marketing guru Rob Shields, and very, very special guest, Marina Strauss, veteran retail reporter for the Globe and Mail. Until then, have a great week.